Take two, I suppose. So this is in lockdown with soon-to-be Dr. Obi Jona.
Yeah.
Obakeng is many things. I think he'll talk about them himself. But we're just trying to catch up with him and see how he's doing. Obi, how are you, man?
Mm. I think I'm well. Overall, I think I am okay. I mean, we
Mm,
all find ourselves in a very confused space and set of feelings, considering what's happening, not only in our own personal world and
mm,
outside of our world. Like, because as human beings, you're an individual, and beyond that, you also interact with other people's worlds. So
mm,
you can't help but realize that what happens outside your own personal world actually ends up affecting you.
mm,
So overall, I think personally I'm fine. I'm okay. I mean, the lockdown has had a disruption on the normal routine of my life, as I'm considering the research that I can't be in the lab anymore. So
mhm.
I've had to formulate a new routine and a new normal
Yeah,
outside
yeah.
of that.
You
Quite
mentioned,
interesting.
sorry, you mentioned the lab. For those who are watching, I'm going to share a screen. Obi's an engineer who was once a corporate for a very brief moment. Um, got went back to engineering. I'm just going to share a photo. So I got this off Obi's Instagram, wearing a suit with the
Oh,
lab coat. And for me, this represents your transition from the corporate world to the lab. But for those that
oh
don't
no.
know you personally, what do you do, and how did you get to that point?
So by training, I'm a chemical engineer, undergraduate chemical engineering. I was final year 2016. 2017, I ended up in management consulting. Technically, it wasn't really by choice to go into corporate or to do consulting because I was affiliated with a big engineering company that's actually quite well known. And they got into trouble. And in 2017, they couldn't take up graduates, and I was one of the grads
Sure.
who were also not able to be taken up.
Mm,
And we were told quite late. And from then, I literally chucked my CV everywhere because by then I was aware that okay, it's the end of my undergraduate career, and then I need to make something of myself. I mean, before then, before the whole corporate thing, I had always wanted to go into the pharmaceutical space and apply my chemical engineering in the pharmaceutical, biopharmaceutical, drug design, and manufacturing space. But I
okay.
ended up in consulting.
Mm,
I mean, it was a really interesting time of my life, actually. Got to work in a team with people who thought differently from me. That's what I really actually appreciated a lot. Because
mm,
coming from engineering, you would have teamwork and you'd always be surrounded by people who were trained to think in a very similar fashion. So
mm,
having left that space for some time in 2017 enabled me to interact on a professional level with people who thought differently from me.
sure.
So that was pretty cool.
Mm,
And but I realized that consulting was not for me. Being in that space, I faced a question, and I was like, if I stay here, it will be purely for the reasons to say that I have a job. But I
sure.
couldn't see myself making a career out of the job I had had.
Mm,
And I think it took doing what I don't like that reminded me what it is that I actually like. It reminded me of where my passions actually lied.
mm,
And I decided to go back to school, and I told some of my friends that, like, dude, are you crazy? Remember how hectic, especially my chemical engineering friends, like,
yeah.
remember how tough it was? We went through hell and back, and
Mm,
you opted to go back. And it's insane because on a year we were like, yo, we're tired, we're done with
yeah.
this place. And I know, right? It's crazy.
Mm,
And then I
mm,
ended up applying to do my master's. It was still with the thought that I wanted to go into the pharmaceutical space, drug
mm,
design space, or drug manufacturing and development space.
okay.
And I applied to do my master's in chemical engineering, specializing in bioprocess engineering. That was in 2018. And 2018, fun times. I think it was probably the happiest year of my life yet,
Oh wow.
especially with my career. Yes,
Mm,
because it was a huge contrast or a stark contrast compared to consulting in 2017. Look, consulting was fun, but like I said, it wasn't aligned with my career aspirations. And I ended up choosing to leave the consulting space. I ended up coming back to UCT for my master's.
mhm,
First year master's, good times, fun times. And then in my second year of masters, my supervisor So what usually happens is that they will track a student's research progress, they look at the potential of the candidate as well as the project.
Okay.
And we realized that I was, in terms of my research, I had progressed to a point where the project could be upgraded. And so I was offered to upgrade my master's to a PhD,
Wow.
a doctoral degree.
Sure.
And so at first it was like, oh boy, hectic. Knowing that I've always wanted to go into research, I thought that I'd do the master's, go back to industry to get industrial experience, and then perhaps return for my doctoral degree. But it actually ended up coming and happening sooner than I had anticipated. I mean, I
Wow.
was much happy. Yeah.
Are
So
you like one of the younger PhD candidates?
I mean, I think there's two of us who are currently 26. Yes, we're there.
Wow.
2 or 3. Yeah.
Jeez.
I can remember.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
There's this thing that I want to do. There we go.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw your emoji.
Yeah.
That's actually really cool. I didn't do that.
I discovered this like last week, by the way.
Really? Yeah. And so I ended up, so they gave me time to think about it because, I mean, it's a big decision, honestly, having to upgrade from the master's to the PhD. And I actually ended up deciding to do it because I was like, if I want a successful career in research, it would always be great to have a doctoral degree. And if it was something that it actually has always been something that I had intended to do at some point. Is that it happened sooner than I had anticipated.
Sure.
And here I find myself doing my PhD in chemistry.
That's amazing, man. That's it's encouraging for me, because the situation you're in is quite unique, and I mean we have to call a spade a spade. What you represent and what you look like doesn't scream PhD graduate, off the bat. And there's a lot of
candidate, not graduate yet. I wish.
Candidate.
Yeah.
And I mean that's maybe society's fault, but I think to be in that space and to be representing that's really amazing. I actually want to ask you something linked to that. I'm going to share another screen. So you studying your PhD in Cape Town at UCT. You also, if I'm not mistaken, you're a tutor in the same department. So I'd take a step of faith to call you a Black academic. I don't know if you identify with that term, but
I mean, I would say so. I mean, having returned to the university space, I've realized my passion for teaching, and it's not only the research aspect of it; it's academic component where you explain things that you've already mastered and understand, especially to undergraduate students, because it takes me back to the times when I was an undergrad and the concepts that I couldn't understand. And I had always wished to have someone to simplify. I mean, I did have tutors, but I did it in a fashion that I had wished to have concepts explained to me. So it's really, it's quite something. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
So I'm sharing this image here of you in the lab. And I mean, we know the climate that we're living in. So for people watching who might watch this in the future, there's a lot going on in our world now. And I think the issue of equality, particularly amongst the Black community, things like representation of Black people in prominent positions, and even just down to the fundamentals of equal treatment of all humans, particularly Blacks who, are being marginalized and have historically been marginalized. What does this image mean to you? But also further than that, what does being in the academic space as a young Black person mean for you in 2020, but also into the future?
I mean, first and foremost, I don't take for granted the position that I hold, because I'm very much aware that I am not representative of the average 26-year-old Black man in South Africa. And having been in the position that I'm in, I try to use my platform. I mean, you're aware that I try to educate people a lot through my stories, by having quizzes. I take snaps in the lab of things, and I try to simplify science, to make science accessible to the lay person.
Mm.
So I feel like, there's a saying, it's actually from the Bible, that says, to whom much is given, much is required, or much is expected. So it comes with responsibility, and I don't take it for granted, first and foremost, like I had said. And it's a privilege.
Mm.
And with this platform, I intend to reach to the Black child and to make it a reality. Because if you take the context of the average Black kid, the idea of working or a career is far-fetched in such spaces, especially in a lab. It's somewhat far-fetched, or they see only scientists on TV or in movies. And typically it would be like a white body, and particularly white men who are scientists. And for them in real life to have access to a person like me on social media, who is not only Black, but also South African, it makes it all the more relatable. That's how I become so much more interactive. I try to make my content very interactive, and I enable them to reach out to me. So it's I see it not only as a tool, and it reached a point where it stopped being about me, because like I said, that it was a lot that was put on my shoulder. And because of that, I see it as a tool which reaches out to the Black child and South Africa as a whole, to realize that science, or the idea of science or being a researcher, people would think that you'd be this old person without a life, and only doing things like that. And once I challenge and interrogate that stereotype of what it means to become a researcher, it's by me demonstrating it through the things that I would do outside the lab, and to make it life relatable, to show them that it's actually possible.
Sure. That's amazing. Why science? I mean, you're mentioning now how somewhat inaccessible the concept of science is for, let's call it, the
It
average
actually
child.
is. That's a good question. I mean, when I was in grade 10, I wanted to become either an astrophysicist or a quantum physicist. Like I've always been, yeah. So I honestly even can't trace back to when my passion for science began. But it was a thing of me being aware that I'm quite strong with my maths and physical sciences. And because of that, naturally, I gravitated toward careers that are in STEM. By STEM, I say science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so I read up a lot independently. I grew up in a household where we were with our grandparents. My grandfather is a big reader, so books you'd end up. I found myself sometimes reading books that are like beyond me. I would understand the content or the concepts. And because of that, I was exposed to such things at a very young age. But I don't know how exactly to attribute that to choosing particular science. I just happened to be quite strong with my maths and sciences. And I had thought that I was going to become a theoretical physicist, like I said, either an astrophysicist or a quantum physicist, because I thought it was really cool. The idea that they're able to speak of things that they couldn't see was really appealing to me. And then I had a cousin who, when I was in grade 10 or 11, she was about second or third year electrical engineering. And then she was like, you want to study science? And I'm like, yeah, science is cool. Don't you think it's cool? And she made me realize that with science, to become successful, you honestly would have to study to become a researcher, because technically scientist is basically a researcher.
It is.
And with undergraduate degree in science, you can't really become a researcher yet. Most scientists, if not all prominent scientists, would have studied and trained up until a PhD. And she made me realize that I could actually venture into a career which is aligned with my strengths and my career aspirations, but wouldn't take me as long. And she was like, consider a career in engineering. And I was against the idea, because by then I didn't truly understand what engineering was. So for me, it was like, I don't want to see myself in like PPE, getting my hands dirty, in an overall with boots. I'm like, nah, that's not it. I'd rather be working on formulae and doing calculations, or wearing a lab coat and playing with chemicals. That to me was more appealing, because by then I didn't understand. But when I grew older, that was like late grade 11 into matric, I gave it a chance. I started to think about engineering, and chem was the most appealing to me, because initially, you know how as kids, or by then, I don't know, yeah, we did actually have smartphones. You'd sit in the bathroom and there'd be stuff. So it'd be like toothpaste, and I'd pick up toothpaste, and at the back of it, you see all these chemicals. And the question that I'd ask myself is, who actually gets to decide what goes into this product and how much of it? So questions like that. So initially I thought that that's what a chemical engineer does.
Okay.
And I'm like, maybe that's a chemical engineer. Only to find out that you have chemists involved in that as well. It's only once you study as a chemical engineer until the master's or higher that you become involved in product design. So chemical engineers are process engineers where the product is discovered or formulated in the lab, and then we step in to design a chemical process to produce it in large scales for the purpose of commercializing the products.
Okay.
Whereas research engineers are in the lab producing things at pilot scale or at like a much smaller scale to determine the feasibility, to optimize the product. So especially, actually linking that back to when I came for my master's, I was then faced with product design because of my research. I was then taught to do research and to use tools that are beyond the undergraduate syllabus. So that was pretty cool.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does. It does. And it made me think of something else. So you're talking about product design. Do you still make beer? I'm going to put that out on the internet. Even though you may not want people to know you make beer. Are you still making beer?
No, it's really cool. So I'm part of UCT Brewing. I actually manage the Instagram page. I'll share the link to the page. So it's something that we do on the side. It's ran by postgraduate students in chemical engineering. It's like something that we do on the side. Some people tend, whenever I would post pictures of us brewing, some people would tend to think that it's linked to my research. And I'm like, but guys, I keep on saying I work with bacterial vaginosis and I'm producing probiotics. And then how does that link to beer? I don't know. It would be interesting though if someone would link those two.
Yeah.
But we would do that as a side thing because it's almost as though you realize that with the knowledge that you have, you're able to do so much more than just be seen as a nerd, as people would think. That literally everything that we see around us, the TV, heaters, our smartphones and laptops, it seems like fun items, but it took a lot of science and engineering behind it. So for us, as well as bioprocess engineers, we decided to use our knowledge to make something that's really cool. We actually every year participate in the SAB Brewing Challenge against other universities.
Okay.
Yeah, we would actually brew beer and we would enter a competition.
Sure.
And in 2018, we actually came first.
Wow.
Which was really cool. Yeah, UCT came first out of like 14 or 15 universities across the country.
That's amazing.
That was really cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Talking about
that's what my beer.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
No.
So that's what my beer making is all about.
Oh, okay. No, I was saying, talking about alcohol, I want to share a video. Some people found it disturbing. Some found it hilarious. I didn't really know what to think about it, but I'll share it nonetheless. Where's this thing now? There. I'm pretty sure you may have seen this thing. I'll play it, and then I'll ask you something. I'll stop with this. I'm not sure if you recognize the video, but it was recorded on. You do.
Yeah.
So it was recorded on the 1st of June when South Africa went into level 3 of our lockdown in terms of risk stratification. I'm not sure what terms they use, but one of the pivotal hallmarks of that was the sale of alcohol. I wanted to get your opinions on that. I know you're a foodie. You often cook with wine, have wine with you. You're staying in Cape Town, which is South Africa's capital of wine. So I just wanted to find out your thoughts, but also, I mean, it may not, you'll decide to the extent that you answer this, but I'm of the opinion that South African culture somewhat idolizes or worships alcohol. Or maybe using different terms, is dependent on alcohol for our society to run, both economically, but also psychologically.
Yes.
So I don't know if you want to comment on that, but also just alcohol back in society. What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's quite interesting. I mean, I drink alcohol as well myself. So being without alcohol, well, I did have alcohol for some point, and then there was a time where, okay, I thought, why not?
Mm,
But it was really cool that I could have my wine back and I could
mm,
drink alcohol again once it was, the sale was reinstated yesterday.
mm,
But in the greater context, in the South African context, and considering how there's research actually that has linked, it was done here actually at UCT with courtesy
mm,
researchers here, where they had linked gender-based violence to the consumption of alcohol and how the number of casualties have reduced ever since the ban on the sale of alcohol was
wow.
placed alongside alert level 4 of the
Mm,
lockdown.
mm,
So in that, from that perspective, it was good that alcohol was taken away.
mm,
And it's sad how, in many instances, people tend to abuse alcohol. I mean, it's a substance. As every and any other thing, too much of anything is bad.
mm,
Just like water, we need water
mm,
to survive. But at the same time, you can drown in a pool if too much water is in your system. Like
mm,
I'm aligning it to that.
mm,
So it's unfortunate that some people do not consume responsibly, and it's aligned with things like gender-based violence or people driving around recklessly. I know people aren't even supposed to be driving now, but I've heard from my friends who are actually medics as well that
wow.
even from yesterday, I'm sure you can actually attest. I don't know if you've been going to work, but
No, I
apparently
have.
there's been more casualties
Yeah,
because of alcohol.
yeah.
So in that light, it's really not cool
Mm,
that people are treating it that way. It's a social tool, I believe.
mm,
However, it's also dangerous. Like I had made the analogy with water and a pool, that too much of anything is actually not great.
mm.
So that was the first part. And the second part of your question, you mentioned, what did you say again about alcohol?
Just about how our society is so dependent
Idolizes
on it,
alcohol.
idolizes it. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Like I said, for me, it's a social tool, and it's not great that people like abusing it, and things
Mm,
like casualties end up happening. Idolizing. It's actually true. South Africans, I think, I read a stat, an
mm.
article that said that we, in terms of the amount of alcohol that we consume per annum, we rank fourth highest in the world.
We rank fourth highest.
Yes. And
Wow.
considering we are a developing country or borderline third world,
Mm.
it's alarming how much money people actually spend on alcohol, which I
Yeah,
guess you say that we idolize alcohol.
yeah.
So it's honestly not great, and I don't know what could be done to control people's consumption of alcohol, especially under these conditions, because
Mm.
it's also been linked to people's immunity reducing, and now is the time to be the most healthy for all of
Exactly.
us. So it really is a tough one.
Mm.
That you get people who consume it responsibly, however, because there's also a percentage who end up abusing the alcohol and things like gender-based violence and more casualties, and
Mm.
it's it's a tricky question to answer.
Mm. Mm. No, you
Yeah.
see, the space that you're in, I think I'm exactly there as well. It's just so tricky.
Mm.
So there are benefits, both real and perceived, but
Mm.
some of the trade-offs are real. So, I mean, I worked yesterday on the 1st of June at night, and
Yeah.
of the cases, so I work in a surgical department. Of the cases that I saw, 60% were alcohol related, and a big number of that 60% were all trauma, and trauma is avoidable. So it's not like having a appendicitis or having your intestines get blocked. Trauma, if you
Yeah.
just stay away from the source, you won't be a victim. So
Yeah.
I mean that's something real that can't be ignored. So it's such a difficult one to navigate. I don't.
And it was just overnight. Like,
Mm,
no, actually, yesterday, you said yesterday. It was the first time, I mean, at 9 a.m., that's weird, because I think they say it was between 9 and 5.
Mm.
If between those few hours, the number of cases were able to spike so much.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's crazy.
It makes one think. I mean, I saw someone once tweet saying that the ban on the sale of alcohol should be retained forever. And I'm like, I don't know about that because it has economic implications as well. But if you hear such things, it's quite frustrating
Mm.
because it's not cool that if such things happen, I mean, it's going to end to alcohol being taken away and the ban being reinstated,
Mm.
the ban on the sale of alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's true. Before we part ways, one last question. So some people, not some people, I think there's thought, maybe more feeling that 2020 is gone. You know, a lot of people ended last year saying 2020 is going to be my year. People put on their vision board and called it 2020. And now we're in June, and I think people's perceptions of what the year would be have seriously been challenged and changed. As someone who perhaps has gone through that mental process, but is also now seeing a small transition, you know, from what I understand, you're back in the lab. There's a, you know, graded
Oh, no, not
reintroduction.
yet.
Oh, you're not yet.
No, no, not yet. We
Oh,
haven't
okay.
returned to that.
Okay, so
So
that so
I'm
so
still
that even
under lockdown.
sorry.
No, I'm saying so I'm still at home under lockdown as well.
Okay. Okay. So perhaps even the question applies to you even more. So, you know, the normal order of things has been halted. Um, but on the other side, there's this glimmer of hope that perhaps things will change, but not necessarily in the way that we would have thought at the end of 2019.
Yes.
What would
Yes.
your thoughts or even a message to people be, in terms of thinking about how 2020 has kind of morphed into what it is now, and not necessarily salvaging the year, but thinking about it, you know, in a way that could potentially be positive.
I think all of us, or most of us, have gone through storms at one point or another in our lives.
Mm,
And I want to align what's happening now to whatever situation that we've all been through, where things turned differently as to what we had anticipated. And in like this time around in 2020, it's even more fitting and shouldn't be. Okay, I can't really say that, but what I'm trying to say is that it's happened to all of us. It's not like it's an individual thing. All lives have been like impacted. And however, it becomes your responsibility to make the most of what you have or where you are and find yourself right now. It doesn't mean that you need to give in. If you had hoped to achieve certain goals, it might mean that the goals should only be deferred if the lockdown has implications or have impacted your goals by then. If anything, the lockdown should be a time that people should use to introspect, to sit down and to see and realign their goals or try to contextualize not only how things might have been, but take the time that we have now and say where to from now that things are here. It might only mean that things are deferred and postponed by a few months, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we should all lose heart and find ourselves in a place where we're despondent and think that our lives have now ended. Because honestly, this is not forever. It's not going to be soon. I mean, I'm sure by December we will still be, COVID will still be around as well as next year, I believe. So it has to do with learning how to rejuggle balls. If you're given three balls to juggle and then one falls off or a fourth one is thrown in, it literally is about learning to try to make the situation balance and taking charge of your life. Because I remember I had a chat with a friend of mine that it's so interesting that what we do under lockdown, most of us have never actually had so much free time, if I can actually call it free time. And some people feel like, oh no, it'll be a blank on my CV. They're going to ask me, what were you doing during lockdown? And I find that it should be used as a time for people to rediscover themselves, to cultivate new skills. People should learn how to code. They should sign up for online courses. That's actually what I've been up to. I've been cooking more frequently, as you are aware of.
Yeah.
And it's a time, yeah. It shouldn't be something. It shouldn't be made to feel like a nightmare that does not end.
Mm,
Things have been put on hold, but not stopped. Life is yet to continue as under a new normal, if I may say. But it shouldn't be looked at through a negative lens. That's my position on things. Because even me, my research has now been put on hold, of course, but I'm pushing a lot of my writing.
mm,
So, yeah. And now that things like our social lives and many other things like that have been taken away from us, we're put in a position to also actually realize that we can live a very fulfilling life with very minimal things. My expenditures have dropped massively. Like there's no more eating at a restaurant or doing things, doing all over the city and such things. So we're made to learn more not only about ourselves but about the world we live around and how we relate to other people, virtually especially.
mm,
So it should be looked at as an interesting time because we're all in it together after all. It's not like it's only your life that has been put on hold or paused, but see it as things being deferred, and the deferment should not mean that your goals have then been cancelled.
yeah.
It's just that it's a pause, and because that has been put on hold, cultivate new skills, reinvent yourself, rediscover what it is that you're passionate about, and make the most of the free time that you actually have right now.
Sure. That's so wise. That's actually so wise and so helpful. For those watching, you heard it here first. The soon-to-be professor. See what I'm doing now? Cultivating.
I can see you turning it a notch higher every time.
Just
You start to be doctor, and then
we're moving. But I think that's really helpful, and I hope that helps someone out there who may be feeling like they're in a bit of a slum. But yeah, man, no, Obi, thank you. No, say.
No, I'm saying, and it's normal. It's okay to feel confused. It's okay to feel like your life is all over the place. It's fine to be scatterbrained. What's important is for you to have connections and friends and people with whom you can confide in and express how you feel. People you trust, your family, your friends. I also avail myself, honestly. It's for anyone who wants to chat and to honestly reflect, because sometimes it's so difficult to find ourselves in this space and to only but wonder how life might have, how life would have turned around had there not been this pandemic. And it sometimes just takes talking to other people and realizing that it's not only happening to you, and that comes as a breath of fresh air and makes me realize that we're all in this together, honestly, and it's going to end soon.
Yeah. One day.
Yeah.
No, man, Obi, I really appreciate your time, and this was really awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you.